You're not here by accident tonight. Your soul seeks to understand why some people only realize our worth when it's too late, and the Stoics knew the secret to transform this pain into unshakable serenity. Have you ever wondered why it sometimes hurts so much when someone doesn't seem to notice your worth? Maybe it's a friend who doesn't make time for you, maybe a partner who takes your efforts for granted, or a colleague who constantly overlooks your ideas. If that question hits close to home, you're not alone. People everywhere struggle with the feeling of being undervalued, but the ancient Stoic philosophers had a very clear perspective on this problem, and it starts with understanding our own self-worth as something that exists entirely inside of us, not given or taken by anyone else. This simple truth can be life-changing, so let's talk about why the Stoic approach to self-worth is so practical and how it can give you peace of mind in situations where others fail to appreciate you. Think about the way we often grow up. From a young age, most of us learn to measure our value based on how others respond to us. A smile from a parent, praise from a teacher, approval from a group of friends. These moments feel good, and naturally we chase them. When we get them, it feels like the world is in order. But what happens when that approval disappears? Suddenly, our confidence seems to vanish with it, and we start to question ourselves. The Stoic philosophers saw this cycle for what it was, a trap that leaves us constantly at the mercy of other people's moods, opinions, and judgments. Epictetus, one of the most famous ancient Stoics, once said that we should care more about who we are than about the opinions of others. In other words, it's important to realize that our value as human beings doesn't actually change depending on whether someone labels us as lovable, useful, smart, or successful. Those are just opinions floating on the surface. The real foundation, according to the Stoics, is the knowledge of our own intrinsic worth, something we all have from birth and that can't be increased or decreased by outside forces. It helps to picture self-worth as something permanent inside you, like your own heartbeat. You might be aware of it all the time or sometimes forget it's there, but it never disappears, even if every person you know suddenly turned their back on you. The Stoic perspective is that we should ground ourselves in this idea and remind ourselves regularly that validation from the outside is just the cherry on top, not the main ingredient. This way, life's ups and downs, or the unpredictable behavior of friends, family, or colleagues, can rattle us less with every passing year. This doesn't mean Stoics were against building healthy relationships or forming strong communities. On the contrary, they saw connections as important parts of the human experience. But they were clear that when it comes to inner peace and satisfaction, the only security is found in our own attitudes and beliefs, not in chasing after the approval of others. Chasing approval sets us up for disappointment because people are unpredictable and their standards change all the time. If you get a compliment on Monday for doing a great job at work, you might feel on top of the world. But by Friday, if someone ignores your suggestion in a meeting, those good feelings fade and self-doubt creeps in. The truth is, neither the compliment nor the insult changes who you are at your core. At your core, you are the same person, valuable, capable, and worthy of happiness. The Stoics encourage us to practice remembering this, especially in the face of criticism, but even in the face of praise. Both are distortions from the outside world. Both can lead you away from your own sense of worth if you rely on them for your happiness. When the Stoics spoke about external things, like money, physical beauty, possessions, or reputation, they used the word externals to describe all the things outside our direct control. They taught that true happiness comes from focusing on what's in our control, our own choices, judgments, and behaviors, rather than chasing the approval or admiration of others. If you center your life around things that can be taken away from you, or that depend on someone else's opinion, you're building your house on sand. But if you focus your attention on living with virtue, according to your own standards, then you have a foundation that nothing and no one can shake. A helpful way to practice this idea is by using a little mental pause whenever you notice yourself aching for another person's approval. Ask yourself, if this person never approves of me or what I'm doing, does it actually change my true worth? Or is my worth exactly the same as before they walked into the room? The Stoic answer is clear. Your worth is untouched. You have control over your actions, your words, and your character. You get to choose whether you live with honesty, kindness, and courage. Everything else is noise. This isn't always easy to remember, especially if you've developed the habit of tying your self-esteem to how others see you. Our brains are wired to want to belong, and society often emphasizes popularity and status as markers of success. But the Stoics recommend deliberately breaking this habit through reflection and practice. For example, Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, would often remind himself in his journal that fame and praise are like the noise of clapping hands, harmless, temporary, and ultimately meaningless compared to inner integrity. A side effect of this approach is a calm kind of confidence. When you are no longer desperate for someone else's recognition, you can move through life with more freedom. You can make decisions based on what's right, not what's popular. If you make a mistake, you can admit it and learn from it, instead of shrinking in fear of judgment. And if someone overlooks your efforts or criticizes you unfairly, you can take stock in a balanced way, asking if there's anything useful to learn, but not letting your sense of worth collapse with someone else's careless words. Another important Stoic teaching here is that not everyone is going to understand or appreciate your true value, no matter how hard you try to impress them. That's just a fact of life. Some people are wrapped up in their own problems or have their own blind spots and simply won't see your contributions or efforts. The Stoic solution is to recognize that this is outside your control and not a reflection of your actual worth. Your job is to act according to your best values, with integrity and consistency, and to judge yourself by your own standards rather than the ever-changing opinions of others. This mindset doesn't mean becoming arrogant or closing yourself off from useful feedback. In fact, Stoics believed in humility and growth. But the crucial point is that feedback from others is just information, not a verdict on your actual value. You can take what's helpful, let the rest roll off your back, and keep going. When you no longer treat every comment or reaction as a referendum on your self-worth, you become much less emotionally vulnerable to the ups and downs of human approval. It's also important to acknowledge that it's totally normal to feel hurt when you're overlooked or underappreciated, especially by people you care about. Stoicism isn't about pretending to be a robot or suppressing all emotions. Instead, it's about developing the ability to step back, understand your feelings, and choose how to respond. You can feel the sting of rejection without letting it define you. You can notice sadness or anger, then remind yourself that at your core, your worth hasn't actually changed at all. One good practice is to periodically remind yourself of your intrinsic qualities, things like kindness, resilience, curiosity, generosity, or humor that have nothing to do with other people's opinions. You can reflect on your actions and intentions, the things you do when no one is watching, and the strength you've shown in situations where external recognition was nowhere in sight. These are the qualities that truly define self-worth, and they stay with you no matter who's in your life or what they think about you. Sometimes, you might find yourself in situations where people close to you don't really see your value. Maybe it's a boss who never notices how hard you work, or a friend who only calls when they need something from you. The Stoic approach is not to become resentful or to start playing mind games to win their approval back. Instead, it's to focus on your own actions, honor your own standards, and let go of the outcome. Over time, this reduces the emotional grip that those relationships have on you, because you realize your well-being doesn't depend on someone else recognizing your worth. Another idea from Stoic thinking is the importance of understanding what actually belongs to you. According to Epictetus, the only things that truly belong to us are our thoughts, our intentions, and our actions. Everything else, other people's opinions, behavior, or affection, is outside our control. By understanding and accepting this, you can let go of trying to manage how others see you, which is a battle no one can win. Instead, you invest your energy where it counts, your own conduct, growth, and self-respect. If you practice seeing your worth as a constant, something pure and untouchable inside you, then it becomes much easier to deal with life's disappointments and rejections. You stop seeing yourself as a victim whenever someone fails to appreciate you. Instead, you simply note that people don't always get it right. Their judgment isn't always accurate or fair. And that's okay, because your value doesn't depend on their understanding. Over time, building your self-worth on this unshakable foundation brings other benefits. You start to worry less about comparing yourself to others or competing for validation. You might notice that you have more mental energy to put into your goals, your passions, your learning, instead of constantly asking, "Do they like me?" Or, "Did I do enough to impress them?" You ask a much more rewarding question: "Am I living according to my own values?" This question is both liberating and empowering. Of course, it takes practice to internalize all of this. Old habits die hard, especially if you've spent years seeking approval or fearing rejection. The Stoics knew this, and they recommended daily reflection as a way to make progress. You can try writing down your thoughts each evening, asking where you depended too much on other people's opinions and where you acted according to your own standards. Over time, your attention starts to shift inward, and you get more comfortable relying on your own judgment. A practical result of this mindset is that you become much harder to manipulate. People who try to exert control over you by withholding approval, love, or support, whether on purpose or by accident, don't have the same hold anymore. When your sense of self is rooted in your own values and choices, you can interact with others more openly and honestly. You're less likely to bend yourself out of shape to win people over, and more likely to stand up for what you believe is right, regardless of the outcome. This outlook also prepares you to navigate setbacks and criticism with greater balance. When someone criticizes you, instead of spiraling into self-doubt or anger, you pause and consider if there's anything useful in their words. If there is, you use it as information for your growth. If not, you let it go, knowing that your core value isn't on trial. This kind of equanimity is one of the hallmarks of Stoic self-worth. Ultimately, understanding yourself through the lens of Stoicism isn't about feeling superior or pretending you don't care about relationships. It's about remembering over and over that your peace of mind and your sense of personal value come from inside. The world is always going to be unpredictable. People are always going to have their own views, and not everyone will appreciate you. But if you recognize your own worth independently of outside approval, you can build a much more resilient and satisfying life. The next time you notice yourself hoping for recognition or worrying about being overlooked, step back for a moment. Take a breath. Remind yourself of your own values and what's truly within your control. Your real worth was there long before anyone noticed it, and it will remain, even if the world never does. That's the foundation the Stoics offer, a source of comfort that can carry you through just about any situation where you feel you haven't been valued. And as this understanding grows, so does your sense of calm, confidence, and real strength. And once you start to really get that your worth isn't up for debate, something interesting happens. You realize you have a lot more freedom in your choices with people. Think of those situations where it's become glaringly obvious that someone just doesn't value you, doesn't recognize your effort, constantly overlooks you, or maybe takes you for granted in pretty much every interaction. It can be unsettling, and even uncomfortable, admitting that a relationship isn't giving you anything back. But this is exactly where a Stoic way of approaching detachment comes into play. The idea of detachment in Stoicism is about making intentional decisions regarding where you put your energy. Imagine reaching a point where you see how much of your day, maybe even your whole week, is being eaten up by worry or frustration over someone's lack of appreciation. With all the things life already throws at you, that's a major drain. Detachment doesn't mean pretending you don't care about anyone or shutting everyone out of your life. It means being wise enough to invest your energy in people and places where it's actually respected and reciprocated. Picture a friendship where over time, you're always the one making plans, checking in, asking how the other person is doing, yet when you need something, there's no one there. Taking a closer look, you might start to realize that this relationship is one-sided. The other person may not even realize they're doing it, or maybe they do, and they just don't value your time like you do theirs. In either case, there comes a moment when, instead of quietly hoping things change or resenting them silently, you make the decision to pull back a bit. Not dramatically, not with a lot of drama, but with clarity. Here's what often surprises people. When you calmly and quietly take a step back from those who don't value you, it tends to catch their attention. It rattles expectations. If someone is used to you always being there, dropping everything for them, or forgiving them automatically, suddenly being less available or simply not chasing after them changes the whole dynamic. What's unique about this change is that it's powered by calm self-respect, not by anger or the need to prove anything. Instead of venting or making a scene, you're just acting on what you've observed. By doing this, you actually demonstrate maturity. Detachment is a skill that, once you start using, you see how much freedom it gives you from those draining emotional roller coasters. It's about reclaiming your focus and reserving your care for situations and people who really show you respect. You stop feeling the obligation to keep investing energy into a relationship just because it's familiar or because you've always done it. Instead, you ask yourself if this effort is still making sense for you, knowing your time and mental space are valuable. If you've been in a workplace where your efforts are constantly overlooked, maybe you're always the last to be acknowledged at meetings, or you notice the credit for your ideas mysteriously goes to someone else, detachment gives you a way to process it differently. Instead of allowing the frustration to build or jumping into endless cycles of trying harder just to be seen, you take a cold, honest look at what's happening. Maybe it's time to stop volunteering extra for a boss who doesn't notice. Maybe it's worth investing in developing skills or relationships elsewhere, where your contributions are more visible or valued. Either way, you get to decide what you'll tolerate and what you won't. Learning to let go isn't something that comes naturally to most people, especially if you were taught to never give up or to stick with relationships no matter what. Many times, people get stuck thinking if they just do more, eventually they'll get the validation they crave. But like the Stoics pointed out, that's putting your happiness in someone else's pocket. Once you see that detachment is not about becoming cold, but about protecting your self-respect and well-being, it changes everything about how you approach your connections. There is a noticeable difference in how life feels when you stop viewing detachment as losing something, and more as making room for things that genuinely make you feel appreciated. It's like you create space for relationships that run on mutual respect instead of obligation or old habits. There's a relief that shows up once the internal struggle fades away. You no longer feel trapped by the fear of disappointing others who never showed up for you in the first place. Slowly, you start seeing who really belongs in your circle, and the relationships that grow from that are more authentic. Sometimes people worry that detachment means ending every relationship that isn't perfect. In reality, it's about drawing the line where your boundaries have repeatedly been ignored. Sometimes that means reducing the closeness, investing less energy, or in some cases, fully stepping away. Each situation is different, and there's no need for big declarations or public announcements. Most of the time, the shift is almost invisible to anyone except you. It shows up in how much less you check your phone for their messages, how much lighter you feel at the end of the day, or in the quiet confidence that grows from honoring your own limits. The interesting thing is, when you quietly step back, people who didn't value you in the past usually notice, sooner or later. This is because your presence, support, or attention was something they took as a given. When that's suddenly no longer on offer, it throws off what they expect. In some cases, they might reach out, ask what changed, or even try to pull you back into old patterns. Sometimes you might get apologies or sudden gestures of affection. But by that point, you can decide calmly whether that's enough or if it's just a reaction to losing your energy. Detachment also has a ripple effect in other areas of your life. For example, if family members constantly undermine your achievements or make you feel small, practicing detachment doesn't mean cutting them off, unless that's truly necessary for your well-being. Instead, it might look like you no longer sharing exciting news or not letting their negative comments ruin your evening. You might choose to invest more time in friends, hobbies, or communities where your strengths are acknowledged. You're simply redirecting your energy toward what nurtures you rather than drains you. It's important to remember that detachment in Stoicism isn't about hating, blaming, or needing to punish others, but about being wise in where you spend your most limited resource, your attention. You're not shutting off emotion or becoming indifferent. You're choosing to give yourself the dignity of not begging for crumbs of appreciation. Some people never notice what you do for them until you stop doing it. Detachment allows you to observe this process and respond from a place of confidence, not desperation. When you start practicing this more often, you also begin to see how much energy is freed up. The mental loops that used to revolve around replaying conversations, trying to guess what someone really meant, or debating whether to text first, they all start shrinking. Without the background noise of constantly worrying if you're enough for someone else, there's more space for you to work on things that matter to you or simply enjoy your own company. Sometimes, just the act of not being the first to reach out, not chasing a conversation, or not offering help before someone even asks, is enough of a shift. It's a way of testing the balance of a relationship. Who puts in the effort when you step back? Are you the only one keeping the connection alive, or is the other person willing to meet you halfway? These are insights you can only get once you allow some space and stop filling every silence or gap yourself. People who've practiced this kind of calm detachment often say the hardest part is at the beginning. The temptation to explain, to make sure the other person isn't mad, or to justify your decision is strong, especially if you're used to being the fixer in your relationships. But over weeks and months, the urge diminishes, and in its place grows a kind of inner respect. With experience, it gets easier to choose where your energy goes, whether it's at work, with friends, in romantic relationships, or even with family. The reactions you get when you practice healthy detachment can be surprising. Some people might become defensive. Others will simply drift away. But there are also those who really notice the difference. Maybe they reach out, apologize, or even start picking up some of the slack. But by now, you're not desperate for their attention or approval. You get to assess the situation clearly, deciding what's best for your well-being. This approach is not about winning or proving someone wrong. It's about having dignity. You're choosing not to explain yourself endlessly or to chase after those who don't see your value. The peace that comes from that choice is, for many, a new experience. You find that needing less from others usually results in feeling much more at peace with yourself. Where Stoic detachment really shines is in situations where you can only control your own effort, never the outcome. This is true for jobs, friendships, romances, even random interactions. You show up, do your best, set your boundaries, and let go of needing a particular response. That's what it means to act with self-respect. With this shift, you also get better at spotting who genuinely values you. Once you stop giving without thinking, patterns become clear. If someone truly appreciates your company, your thoughtfulness, or your help, they'll show it in their own way. You won't have to beg, remind, or push. For those who don't notice, you simply let things fade. No drama, just peace. If you're wondering what to do with the emotional fallout from all this, maybe feelings of sadness, disappointment, or even guilt for stepping back, know that this is normal. Practicing detachment takes courage. You're allowing yourself to move through discomfort for the sake of a more real, fulfilling future. And it's also an ongoing process. There may be times you slip into old habits or feel the urge to overextend yourself. But as you stick with it, the clarity you gain is worth the initial discomfort. Detachment also opens a new kind of space inside you for personal growth. All the energy you use to spend trying to fix unfixable situations or win over people who don't see your efforts can now go into your own interests, learning, and self-improvement. You may find more time for hobbies you've ignored, for fitness, for exploring new work skills, or simply for relaxing. With less drama and less stress, a kind of lightness settles in. If there are relationships in your life where the pattern of being undervalued is deep, deciding to detach can be the only thing that truly brings change. Sometimes it's the wake-up call the other person needs to reassess their own behavior. Other times it's simply a clean break that leaves space for something new and better down the road. Whatever the case, going through with it from a place of calm, not resentment, leaves you feeling empowered instead of bitter. Detachment doesn't prevent you from caring about people or being kind to them. You don't have to hold grudges or build walls. It just means not forcing yourself to give endlessly where nothing comes back. You can be friendly, supportive, and compassionate, but in a way that honors your own needs and boundaries. The relationships that are good for you will adapt and grow. The ones that aren't will quietly fade away. You might also find that your confidence grows with each boundary you set. With practice, detachment gets easier. It becomes second nature to reevaluate every so often. Is this friendship still balanced? Is this job or project respecting my time and skills? Do I feel good after spending time with this person, or do I leave drained and frustrated? No relationship, no role is worth your inner peace. As you look back over the relationships you've practiced detachment with, you might notice something new, a sense of gratitude for the lesson they brought. Even the people who failed to value you have played a role in teaching you what you do want from others, and how important it's become to you that your time and effort are honored. With some distance, you may even feel compassion for those who couldn't meet you in the middle, because you're able to see that their inability to value you most likely comes from their own limitations, rather than anything you did. Guarding your energy and stepping back from those who don't reciprocate is not about closing your heart. It's about knowing you only have so much emotional bandwidth, and that it's worth preserving for what and who matters most. Sometimes that means spending more evenings alone rather than in draining company. Other times it means pouring your energy into a new project, travel, or a community group where encouragement is natural and easy. And at the end of the day, the real benefit isn't just less drama or fewer one-sided relationships. It's a clearer, lighter sense of who you are. Once you no longer feel obligated to make yourself small or twist yourself into knots for someone's approval, life becomes simpler. You make room for ease, for new growth, and for genuine mutual connection. Over time, what used to feel like loss instead becomes evidence that you've chosen self-respect, a choice that, for many, is life-changing in the quietest way. When you look back and see how much simpler things become once you stop spending energy trying to win people over, something else comes into focus. How rejection itself can kickstart a whole different level of change in your life. It's one thing to step back from someone who doesn't appreciate you, but what about those times when you're directly turned down, dismissed, or outright rejected? That sting is real. You feel the drop in your gut when a conversation ends abruptly, when someone ignores your effort, or when you're left out after putting your best foot forward. Almost everyone faces rejection at some point, at work, in friendships, in family situations, or in love. It can feel like a punch, and honestly, it's often uncomfortable and unsettling. But how you use that moment decides a lot about where you'll end up. It doesn't matter much if you're the most confident person, or if you usually have things together. That first moment of rejection can make your thoughts spin for hours or even days. You might immediately start questioning what you did wrong, or convince yourself you're not good enough. For a while, it's hard to see any positives in that sharp feeling of being left out or told no. But after you catch your breath, there's an opportunity that most people miss. You can use that exact moment as a push for real, practical growth. Sometimes, people spend years running from rejection, doing everything in their power to avoid ever being in that spot. They might hold back ideas in meetings, withdraw from group plans, or hesitate to put themselves out there in relationships, all to steer clear of feeling unwanted or unimportant. But avoidance only makes the fear stronger and usually leads to regret over the chances you never took. The truth is, rejection is a part of life. No one goes through their 20s, 30s, 40s, or any decade for that matter, without running into people who just aren't interested, jobs that don't work out, or groups that don't include them. Knowing that, it actually makes more sense to get familiar with what rejection has to teach you, instead of trying forever to dodge it. The most practical place to start is by looking at what actually happened. When you're left out, ignored, or shut down, you'll be tempted to look everywhere else for answers, to find some underlying drama or invisible reason for why things happened. But what gives you real power is being able to ask one straightforward question. What can I learn from this? Sometimes the answer is about timing, sometimes it's about approach, sometimes it's nothing to do with you at all. Other times, you realize you're chasing something you didn't even want that badly in the first place. Or you recognize a pattern in how you go after things or people that leave you feeling small. A lot of real growth comes from those moments right after things don't go your way. You might feel the urge to shrink, to stop trying, or to take it personally. But giving yourself even just a moment to look at the situation clearly, without sugarcoating or blaming yourself, gives you space to respond differently than you have in the past. Maybe you wanted a certain job or a new friendship, but instead of complaining about more qualified candidates or cooler people swooping in, you can ask yourself what's in your control. Was there something you could have done better, or was it about something totally outside your hands? Sometimes you realize you did everything right, and it simply wasn't a fit. Other times you spot areas where you could develop a skill, a habit, or the courage to speak up a little louder next time. This kind of reflection isn't about harsh self-criticism. It's an honest, fair way to look at your own actions and the outcomes that follow. You can use the experience to fuel your next move, rather than letting it become another reason to hold yourself back. People who consistently grow are usually just people who have gotten good at asking hard questions after things fall apart, rather than shutting down or blaming the world. Surprisingly, over time, you might start to see patterns. Maybe certain environments aren't where you thrive, or some kinds of connections don't match your values or energy. Maybe getting turned down for a job or left out of a group gives you the push to try something new you wouldn't have considered before. It's common to hear people say that a painful no eventually led them to a yes that really fit them better. You probably know someone who, after not getting a job they wanted, stumbled into a field that changed their life, or met friends who brought out a better side of them after losing touch with a different crowd. Rejection also builds something you can't fake: thick skin. With every disappointment, the shock wears off just a little, and you start to handle setbacks with a sense of calm you didn't have before. It's not that you stop caring or that these moments stop hurting, but you get better at bouncing back. What seemed like the end of the world last year becomes just another bump in the road this year. Bit by bit, you gain courage to put yourself forward again, knowing now that a no isn't a death sentence. It's the start of a potential lesson. When you sit down and process rejection, especially after the strong emotions cool down, you usually spot a mixture of things you can and can't control. Sometimes the other person's priorities or tastes simply don't match yours. Sometimes there are factors you never see: timing, budget, office politics, or personal circumstances. Recognizing this can be a relief because it means you don't have to accept every no as if it says something fundamental about your identity. That's a mistake a lot of people make, letting rejection become proof that they're not good enough, rather than just an indicator that something wasn't a match. By focusing on what you can actually influence, your preparation, your effort, your boundaries, your willingness to try again, you build a new version of confidence, one that isn't so tied to outcomes. Instead of always wondering if you'll fit in, you get curious about how you can improve or where you really want to be next. You realize pretty quickly that it takes a lot of wasted time and missed opportunities just to avoid the feeling of being rejected once or twice. Over time, the return on taking those risks far outweighs the temporary sting of getting turned down now and then. In situations where you're rejected personally, maybe turned down for a date, a friend pulling away, or a group not inviting you back, it can feel sharply personal. In the moment, most people replay the situation in their minds, wondering what they could have done differently. There's a huge temptation to change yourself, to shrink, or to act out in order to never be rejected again. But with a little distance, you can see things more clearly. Not every rejection is about some flaw in you. Sometimes you simply don't fit with what someone else needs or expects, and forcing things only leads to disappointment down the line. Instead of letting it bruise your self-worth, you can choose to see rejection as a filter, gently steering you toward places and people where you can genuinely fit in. One of the most valuable habits you can build is getting used to gently questioning your own story about why you were rejected. If you're convinced it means you're not successful, not interesting, or not lovable, pause and ask yourself where that idea comes from. More often than not, it's a story you started telling yourself based on just one person's or one group's response, rather than any universal truth. By challenging those stories, you free yourself up to try again, often with more wisdom and intention than before. Sometimes, the people you most want to impress or please simply aren't capable of seeing what you offer because of their own hang-ups, past experiences, or current stress. The mistake is tying your future choices to a single interaction or a handful of bad outcomes. Growth comes from keeping your eyes on the bigger picture, asking yourself what you want to build in your own life. Are there skills, projects, or relationships you'd like to put effort into, regardless of how others respond? Are there parts of yourself you're proud of, no matter who's paying attention? That's what letting rejection fuel your growth actually looks like in practice. Oddly enough, when you have the patience to reflect after being let down, you start getting curious instead of defensive. What could you do next? Where could you improve? Are there other opportunities out there that might suit you better, or ways you could clarify what you want next time? The more you ask, the more useful insights you find. Sometimes people discover whole new interests because they were turned down for an old one. Other times, a handful of rejections push them to sharpen their skills or chase goals they'd put off, leading to successes down the road. Real resilience isn't built by avoiding every possibility of feeling bad. It's created by slowly proving to yourself, through experience, that you can handle discomfort, adjust, and keep going. That's why rejection, as weird as it sounds, makes you tougher and more able to bounce back, not just emotionally, but also mentally and even creatively. When you stop seeing failure or dismissal as something to be ashamed of, you find freedom to try things most people never will. And as you get more practice, your entire attitude shifts around what it means to be valued out in the world. Instead of only focusing on the need to be liked, included, or picked every time, you realize it's just as important to recognize what you appreciate in others and to notice when opportunities genuinely fit. Rejection becomes less about a personal blow and more about finding a better match, whether that's with people, workplaces, or even your own hobbies and goals. On a day-to-day level, you start making choices differently. You stop putting yourself in situations or accepting roles just to please people who don't align with what you value. You let go of the idea that you have to shapeshift for every group or every authority figure. This makes your yes mean more when you do go after something or someone, going in that you want it for real, not just to fill a gap left by someone else's disregard. When looking at your own journey, you might be surprised in hindsight by just how many failures set you up for better things. The events that felt like doors slamming in your face sometimes turn out to be anything but negative. Maybe you didn't get a scholarship, a job, or a big opportunity, only to find a different path that suited you better. Maybe a friendship fell apart, and what seemed like the worst week was actually the start of better, more supportive relationships. This doesn't mean you have to pretend rejection is always pleasant. It's not. But it does mean you see the value in letting disappointments take you somewhere new. Sometimes there's an extra layer of growth that comes from being rejected by people who clearly don't value you. After the initial pain, you can start to see them, and maybe yourself, more clearly. Why did you need their approval so much? Was it about something in you, or just the mistaken idea that everyone has to like or want you? If you dig into these questions honestly, you often find it has less to do with them and more to do with your fears or beliefs about self-worth. Once you see that, rejection starts to lose its edge as something you need to be afraid of. All of this practical experience with rejection eventually adds up to a resilience that shows up everywhere in your life. You get more comfortable applying for opportunities, sharing your ideas, meeting new people, and even setting boundaries. Because you're less afraid of someone saying no, you're more likely to put yourself out there. It may seem backward, but that willingness to risk rejection leads to a richer, more varied set of experiences and, ironically, more chances to be valued by the right people. None of this is theoretical. Everyone you know who's ever grown past their comfort zone did so by hitting roadblocks or facing setbacks. If you spend enough time talking with anyone who seems confident or accomplished, they can usually point to a handful of direct rejections or letdowns that hurt at the time but force them to rethink direction, work harder, or simply try again. Over years, these stories pile up and help you trust that even the painful stuff is part of getting stronger and truer to yourself. In the practical sense, you can even get comfortable enough with rejection that sometimes you half expect it, especially in competitive or busy environments. Instead of dreading a no, you frame it as part of the process, even a sign that you're stretching in new ways. The worst outcome isn't being turned down, it's giving up opportunities just because you can't bear to risk feeling unwanted. That lesson, taken seriously, opens up dozens of experiences you'd otherwise miss. Not every rejection will have some hidden advantage or positive spin. Sometimes it's just hard, and you need time to be upset or disappointed. That's fine too. But after the first waves of emotion pass, there's almost always something useful you can pick up, even if it's only the knowledge that you can survive it and keep moving forward without letting your sense of worth take a hit. Whether you're at a stage where rejection feels crushing or you've learned to move through it with a bit more ease, the process works the same. Notice what hurts, ask what matters, look for the small lessons, and keep moving. Each time you do this, you build not only your skills and self-awareness, but also a quiet confidence. The outside opinions, cold shoulders, or closed doors just don't have the power over you that they used to. With time, you might even start to notice opportunities hiding in the rough edges of your setbacks. The real growth doesn't come from the rejection itself, but from your willingness to see past the discomfort and take control of your own progress. You realize you have choices in how you respond, what you chase next, and which directions you're willing to try again. There's no trick or magic phrase that makes rejection painless, but the habit of facing it, learning and adjusting sets you up for more satisfying relationships, work and growth for years to come. When you finally realize that rejection isn't the end of your story and you can actually pull value out of those disappointing experiences, something in the way you handle emotional stress starts to shift. If you look closely at the people who don't seem rattled when they're ignored, turned down, or underappreciated, you'll often notice one skill running through their responses: emotional control. It's not that they don't feel hurt or frustrated. They just have a different way of responding in the moment. So much of what throws us off balance when we're not valued comes from knee-jerk reactions, feeling the sting and then acting on it immediately. But there's a huge difference between reacting in the heat of your feelings and responding out of choice. It's easy to be swept up in a rush of anger or sadness when someone pushes your efforts aside or questions your worth. That feeling might show up like a tight chest, fast words, or even a sudden urge to fire back with something you'll regret. Most people know that moment when you almost can't help but clap back, roll your eyes, vent to a friend, or shut down. But where things get interesting, and iron strong really, is in learning how to catch yourself before you act out emotionally. If you can pause in that tiny window between the way you feel and what you do or say next, you instantly gain power over the whole situation. The more you practice, the easier and more natural that pause becomes. Sometimes you can literally feel your temperature rising when you're disrespected or dismissed. Maybe that happens at work, when your idea gets passed over, or at home, when a family member shrugs off something you put effort into. It's normal for emotions to come up in those moments. What separates one person from another isn't the emotion itself. Everyone gets angry or upset. But whether that emotion takes the wheel. If it does, you'll probably act in ways you regret or reinforce someone else's low opinion of you. If you keep even a small grip on how you show up, it changes the entire tone of what follows. Let's talk about how that actually feels in the moment. Imagine you're in a meeting and someone interrupts you or talks over your suggestion with something dismissive. Your first instinct might be to get defensive, withdraw, or snap. Instead, just pausing, breathing in and letting yourself notice what's happening inside can be enough to break your usual pattern. A few slow seconds can keep a bad moment from turning into a full argument or a public meltdown. Sometimes, emotional control is as basic as choosing to wait before replying to a rude text or email. Instead of writing back right away, you choose to give it an hour or sleep on it, and your whole approach softens. Suddenly, you're handling things with a calm, almost surprising confidence. One major benefit of this control is that it unsettles people who expect you to lose your cool. If someone is used to getting a rise out of you, they're often left confused when you just don't react. Imagine someone trying to goad you, nudge you into a fight, or guilt trip you. When you don't respond with anger or desperation, it throws them off their script. This isn't about being passive, and it's definitely not about letting bad behavior slide. It's about holding back just enough that you get to decide how you deal with things without being pushed around by other people's moods. The more often you exercise this kind of control, the easier it gets to stay true to yourself, especially during stressful conversations or confrontations. You're not playing emotional tug-of-war, but standing quietly on your side, choosing if and when to respond. Over time, you start to notice how rarely an immediate emotion-driven reaction actually helps anyway. Most regret, drama, or embarrassment after an argument comes not from how you felt, but from what you blurted out in the middle of it. Sticking to your values, instead of getting caught up in the mood, is a way of protecting yourself as much as keeping your dignity. You'll probably find that people start to notice this calm. They may even test your boundaries more than once, seeing if you'll go back to raising your voice or defending yourself. But with each round, you're showing that you can handle difficult feelings without blowing up or backing down. That doesn't just help in tense moments, it actually changes how people treat you in the long run. Colleagues, friends, or family see you as steady, not easily unbalanced or manipulated. That's real respect, and it starts with your own choices. This way of handling your emotions also protects you from regret later. When you respond, not react, you can stand by your words and actions, even if things don't go perfectly. You know you didn't stoop to insults, didn't break trust, and didn't raise the stakes unnecessarily. You don't have to go back and apologize for losing your temper or scramble to patch things up afterward. That leaves you with a lot more energy and a lot less anxiety about fallout from emotional blow-ups. It's also important to point out that emotional control does not mean shutting down every feeling, pretending things don't bother you, or bottling up your reactions. People sometimes confuse emotional control with being cold or emotionless, but that's not what this is about at all. Instead, it's about making a very real distinction between what you feel and what you do next. The feelings are allowed, even expected, but the actions are in your hands. This gives you permission to fully notice your anger, sadness, or frustration without letting it dictate your response. It helps to have simple practices for this, especially if you know you're someone who reacts quickly or feels things strongly. Sometimes it's as simple as counting to 10 or taking 3 deep breaths before you speak after a tough comment. Other times you might excuse yourself from a situation to cool off. Even just sitting quietly and feeling your pulse settle before replying can work wonders. Over time, these small habits build up a buffer between your emotions and your choices, and you find that you get rattled less by other people's words or actions. In situations where someone has repeatedly underestimated you or taken you for granted, this skill is even more valuable. Instead of trying to prove them wrong in the heat of the moment, you get to show, calmly and over time, who you actually are. Withholding a reaction can even sometimes lead people to reflect on their own behavior. If they notice you're not biting, they might ask themselves why. This difference in energy changes the conversation, and sometimes it changes the relationship entirely. One of the hardest places to practice emotional control is in personal relationships, where you might feel most vulnerable or exposed. It's easy to take criticism from a stranger or coworker, but when someone you care about acts like you're not enough or doesn't see your effort, the urge to defend yourself is magnified. That's when having a plan ahead of time, knowing you'll take a break, step away, or write your feelings out privately, helps you weather the first storm. Later, when you're clearer, you can choose how to explain your side or set a boundary. It's also possible to practice emotional control by choosing to not let someone else's words or neglect sink into your own self-image. If a partner forgets your birthday or a boss ignores your contribution, it's painful, sure, but that doesn't mean you need to act out, lash out, or carry the slight as a new truth about who you are. You notice the feeling, decide how much to express or not, and remind yourself that your value doesn't hang on that single moment. That's a powerful place to operate from, and it doesn't go unnoticed. Over time, as you develop this habit of responding, not reacting, you may start to see how rarely big blow-ups are necessary. Most conflicts lose their sharp edges if just one person stays calm. You might still need to stand up for yourself, explain your point, or disengage from people who never change. But now those decisions come from a clearer place, not from the panic or hurt that floods in right after being overlooked. life feels a bit less chaotic, and you're able to spot solutions that you'd probably miss if your emotions were running the show. Emotional control also gives you breathing room to see the real motives behind someone's dismissive or rude behavior. Sometimes it's not even about you. Maybe they're stressed, threatened, unhappy, or distracted. Without reacting, you create a little distance that lets you decide if and how to address the behavior directly. You might ask for a meeting, mention how you felt later on, or even decide to stay quiet and move on. Either way, the decision is yours, not made for you by a rush of adrenaline or embarrassment. In professional settings, this skill can quietly set you apart. People who keep their cool under pressure are usually seen as reliable, mature, and level-headed, even if they're not perfect. If you can be the person in a group who doesn't lose it when things go sideways, that reputation builds on itself. Other people start coming to you for advice, bringing you into important conversations, or relying on you when stakes are high. It's a kind of trust that outlasts small arguments or disagreements. You might also notice your relationships outside work get a bit easier, even if not perfect. Friends, parents, or partners will sometimes still poke at your insecurities or miss the mark with their words, but your ability to listen, pause, and choose what comes next makes big fights much less likely. You still have your limits, and you still get upset. You just don't let those moments steer the whole relationship off track. Building emotional control is a gradual process, and it's totally normal to slip up. There will be times when you react before you think, and times when the best you can do is apologize afterward. The growth comes in noticing those moments and, instead of beating yourself up, planning for how to handle them differently next time. Being kind in your self-evaluation is part of how you learn to calm yourself down instead of spiraling into regret. The other bonus to all this is that people who want to push your buttons or provoke you get bored when it stops working. It doesn't mean you'll never deal with rude or dismissive people again, but it does mean their tactics lose power. You're not a puppet for someone else's moods or manipulations. When you respond on your terms, you take back your agency over your words, your decisions, and even your reputation. Standing calm in the storm of someone else's drama shows a kind of resolve that gets remembered long after the argument. And it may even earn quiet respect from the very people who underestimated you. Another thing you might see is that your own mental health benefits from keeping better boundaries between your inner world and the chaos outside. Over weeks and months, emotional control can mean fewer nights spent replaying arguments, less time worrying about grudges or misunderstandings, and a shorter recovery time when conflict does happen. When your baseline is steadier, you can spot the truly important stuff, like whether a relationship is worth saving or if a particular pattern keeps repeating. With the space you win back from not always being triggered, you make better decisions about how to move forward. People sometimes worry that emotional control means losing passion or becoming less real. But the reality is the opposite. When you're in charge of your reactions, you're actually free to show up as yourself without fear of every little disagreement or slight blowing up into something major. You express yourself better because each word and action is intentional instead of just a spillover from pent-up feelings. Over time, this honesty in your communication invites others to do the same, or at least to meet you with a little more respect. Of course, this doesn't guarantee that everyone will start valuing you, or that dismissive people will suddenly change. But emotional control means their opinion loses its ability to steer your mood, day, or self-worth. Your energy isn't hijacked by every careless word or cold shoulder. You can serve that strength for bigger goals, closer relationships, or for your own peace. In the moments that count, you show that your dignity isn't up for grabs, no matter how anyone else sees you. After enough practice, you may be surprised at how much easier it is to forgive others or let go of friction that used to stick with you for days. The tension fades quicker, and you bounce back to your baseline faster than before. That's not just good for your relationships, it's a huge relief for your own mind and body. Stress, after all, eats away at energy, sleep, and focus. Reducing some of that simply by choosing when and how to respond, not react, is real, practical progress. In the end, showing emotional control when you're undervalued doesn't mean you never get upset or that nothing affects you. It means you recognize what you're feeling and make a conscious call about what you want to do with that emotion. Every time you stick to your core values and stay steady under pressure, you're proving to yourself that you're not at the mercy of other people's approval or criticism. That's real freedom, not just in the eyes of others, but in every corner of your own day-to-day life. Once you start taking charge of your reactions, keeping calm instead of letting your emotions run wild when you feel overlooked, another layer of self-respect opens up for you, not just inside, but in the way you deal with others. This is where setting boundaries steps in. At first, the idea of boundaries might sound serious or even a little intimidating, but in daily life it simply means drawing clear lines to show what kind of treatment you consider acceptable and what you definitely do not. Most people find that without these lines, they slip into habits of people-pleasing, going along with things that don't sit right, or silently resenting situations because they never really voiced what they need. The truth is, everyone has boundaries, even if they haven't taken the time to figure out where they actually are. Your sense of comfort, your energy, your time, and your need for respect are all part of those invisible limits. The problem comes when you don't defend these boundaries. When you don't speak up or correct someone who steps over the line, the message you send, without even meaning to, is that you're okay with it, or at least that you're not going to do anything about it. Over time, that kind of silence is what makes people feel invisible, used, or small in their own lives. Setting boundaries is rarely about confrontation for the sake of drama. Most of the time, it's about giving yourself permission to say no or stop before things go too far. If you look at the moments in your life where you felt most undervalued, maybe a friend always talking over you, a boss dumping extra work on your lap late on Friday, or someone always borrowing money without paying it back, you'll probably notice there was a point where, if you'd said something, the dynamic could have changed. Sometimes you tell yourself it's not worth the hassle, or you don't want to seem rude, so you let things slide. Eventually, though, your patience wears thin and the resentment builds. It's like a simmering pot that finally boils over after enough small slights add up. When you finally do speak up, the reaction is often immediate and even a little shocking. The person who's been crossing your boundary might act surprised, embarrassed, or even defensive, especially if they've gotten used to your silence or agreeableness. Sometimes they genuinely didn't realize they were pushing it, and other times they were counting on you not to challenge them. Either way, the act of putting your boundary into words forces both of you to look at what's actually going on. For example, imagine being asked to help out at work again and again because you're so reliable, but it's clearly code for you'll say yes. The first time you say, "I can't stay late today, I need to leave at 6 o'clock. I have other plans." There might be a pause, even a bit of tension. It's uncomfortable for a second, but it shows everyone that your time matters too. The more consistently you do this, the faster people around you adjust. They stop assuming you're the easy one to dump things on. Instead, they begin to see that you have standards, and that those standards should be respected. The biggest misconception about boundaries is that they're selfish or cold. In reality, boundaries are what make real connection possible. If you never say what's okay or not okay for you, what makes you feel respected, safe, or heard, then people don't know how to treat you in a way that's healthy for everyone. Setting a boundary isn't saying you don't care or you're trying to hurt anyone. It's saying you take responsibility for your own well-being and you give others the same respect. When both sides know where the lines are, it's just easier to get along. A major reason people delay setting boundaries is the fear of pushback. At first, it can happen. People might test your limits, take it personally, or act offended, especially if they benefited from your old way of handling things. But that first awkward stage doesn't last forever. If you keep your message clear and your tone as calm as possible, you'll notice that even the biggest skeptics usually come around, or at least learn to respect your space, even if they grumble. Sometimes people distance themselves, especially if they were only there for their own gain. That can be lonely for a while, but it also frees up your energy and space for relationships that are healthier and more mutual. One common place boundaries show up is with time and availability. Maybe you have that one friend who always drops in without asking, calls at odd hours, or expects immediate attention to every problem. At first, it's easy to be accommodating, but when you never get your own needs met or your plans are always set aside, the situation gets exhausting. Here, a boundary sounds like, "I can't talk right now, but I'm free tomorrow afternoon." Or, "I need advance notice before you come over." It might feel awkward, you might worry about sounding harsh, but it's actually how you keep your relationships balanced and respectful. In families, boundaries can be even trickier. Many people grow up in households where everyone thinks they have a right to your time, decisions, or even your emotions. You might notice family members making comments about your life, pressuring you to share details, or stepping into parts of your life that you'd rather keep private. Drawing the line here can look like, "I appreciate your concern, but I'm not ready to talk about that," or "That's a private matter between me and my partner." The first few times you may get pushback, maybe guilt trips or dramatic sighs, but over weeks and months, the pattern holds if you do. A lot of respect in relationships, whether at home or work, boils down to how well people recognize and honor boundaries. When someone sees that you're serious about your limits, they learn they can't pressure or manipulate you so easily. This completely shifts the dynamic. People either step up and treat you with the respect you deserve, or they back off. Either way, you feel lighter and more in control of your own life because your sense of self isn't tangled up in doing what everyone else expects. Setting boundaries isn't about building walls or isolating yourself. It's about choosing where your responsibility ends and another's begins. For example, when a co-worker tries to make you responsible for their unfinished tasks, you're allowed to say, "I can help you with part of this, but I can't take on the whole job. I have my own projects that need attention." Some people might sulk or complain, but that's just their way of dealing with new limits. What matters is that you're not burning yourself out to save them from their own workload. There will be moments when you set a boundary and someone tries to make you feel guilty for it. People who are used to your flexibility or self-sacrifice may label you as difficult or selfish. That's when reminding yourself why you set boundaries is crucial, because you've learned the hard way what happens if you don't. You remember the times you felt drained, resentful, or invisible, and you know you're not willing to keep reliving those feelings. As you get more comfortable stating your limits, you begin to spot situations where early, gentle boundaries could have saved you a lot of trouble. For instance, in a new friendship or job, you can clarify from the beginning how you like to communicate, how often you can hang out, or what you expect from collaborations. It's much easier to create a healthy pattern from the start than to fix things after someone's already gotten used to taking you for granted. The more you do this, the more natural it feels. Saying, "I can't this time," becomes second nature instead of something that keeps you up at night. You start to notice your sense of inner peace growing too. When you're not always worrying about how to wiggle out of something you never wanted to do, or dreading another demanding call, there's more freedom to use your time and energy the way you want. It's like clearing out a closet. You get rid of what's weighing you down, making space for what actually fits you. Boundaries don't only apply to other people. They also help you shape your own habits and routines. If you're someone who overcommits, works too late, or says yes to everything at the cost of your own rest, you can set limits for yourself too. This might mean closing your laptop at 7 o'clock every night, leaving social events by 10 o'clock, or spending Sundays offline. The first week or two, you might feel like you're missing out, but soon you start to feel better rested and more present wherever you are. Self-applied boundaries are a form of self-respect that over time others start to recognize too. Sometimes standing up for your limits even earns you new respect from people who once overlooked you. The person who always interrupted you in meetings might not change their ways overnight, but your calm insistence, "I wasn't finished yet, please let me finish," gradually gets through. The friend who always dominated your weekends starts realizing you're not always available. These little challenges add up, slowly tuning your environment to match your needs. The reward is not just being less resentful, but actually feeling seen. Not every boundary you attempt to set is accepted gracefully. There will be bumps for sure. Some people might argue, ignore you, or try to work around your limits. But even those rough patches teach you something. They clarify who's really invested in a healthy, two-way relationship and who's just there for convenience. It's tough to face, but it gives you more information to choose who you want to keep close and who it's better to distance from. In that way, boundaries act like a filter, making your circle smaller but more dependable. Kids, spouses, friends, colleagues. No group is immune to the benefits of boundaries. They might not like it at first, but most people actually feel safer knowing where the lines are. There's less guesswork, less drama, and a lot more honest communication. When people aren't left wondering how far they can push, they tend to relax and connect on healthier terms. Even the pushiest personalities eventually learn that respect gets them further than pressure or manipulation. With each new situation, you get a chance to practice. Maybe you'll stumble. Maybe you'll let something slide further than you wanted to. But the more you experiment, the easier it becomes. The goal isn't to never give an inch, but to stay honest about what works and what doesn't. There will be times when you compromise, but there's a world of difference between choosing to be flexible and feeling forced into it. That decision is yours to make. One side effect of consistent boundaries is that you become more present and generous with the people who do respect your limits. When you're not worn down by endless demands or quiet resentments, you have more to give. The relationships that remain start feeling safer, deeper, and more rewarding. You might even notice people seeking your advice, curious about how you manage to stay so balanced. When you're clear with your boundaries, you give others permission to be clear with theirs, and everyone benefits. A challenge that sometimes pops up is how to set a boundary without sounding angry or hurt. The simplest approach is just to be direct, but kind. You don't need a whole speech or a long explanation. Often, one clear sentence is enough. For example, "I'm not able to lend money right now," or "I can't stay after work this week." If someone pushes back, you just repeat yourself calmly. Over time, you get more comfortable letting other people deal with their reactions without feeling guilty or overly responsible for their disappointment. Another tip is to practice with smaller boundaries, like telling a friend you can't answer texts after 9 o'clock at night, or saying you'll join for dinner but not drinks afterward. Those small wins give you practice for bigger situations, like turning down a big ask at work, saying no to a project you don't have energy for, or keeping personal topics off limits with relatives. Each time you honor your limit, you reinforce to yourself and to others that you're in charge of your own life. The changes you'll see once you make boundaries a habit are usually subtle at first. Maybe fewer last-minute requests come your way. Maybe you get thanked more often for your help because you've shown it's not guaranteed. Maybe people just seem a little more aware of your needs, which feels simple, but is actually a pretty major shift for anyone who's been overlooked or taken for granted. Nothing about this means you have to be perfect or unbending. Life is messy, and sometimes helping someone or making a sacrifice feels right, even if it breaks your usual rule. The key is that you're choosing, not defaulting to old habits out of guilt, fear, or routine. That kind of mindful boundary setting brings a powerful confidence that's different from demanding respect through force. It's calm, steady, and convincing. Over months and years, as you stay true to your boundaries, you'll likely look back and wonder how you ever let so many things slide before. You'll notice your relationships are deeper, with less tension and more honesty, and that the pattern of being undervalued gradually fades into the background. Your standards become a natural part of your communication, and people who want to be in your life learn the rhythm. Setting boundaries doesn't block you from connection. It makes every real connection stronger. The journey can feel awkward and bumpy, but it always pays off. Not just in respect from others, but in the peace you gain for yourself. The energy you used to spend worrying about being stepped on or burned out can now go toward the people and pursuits that really matter. You give up nothing that serves you and gain a world where you know your own worth, inside and out. That's what shapes the best, healthiest relationships of your life. And as others feel that shift in you, the way they treat you changes for the better, sometimes subtly, sometimes all at once. The ground you stand on gets more solid, and with every boundary set and held, you rewrite the way the world interacts with you. With boundaries in place, you'll naturally notice a shift in how you value your time and energy, and this change can sometimes mean being in your own company a lot more. Some people look at the idea of being alone and automatically think it's a bad thing, a situation to avoid if possible. There's a lot of pressure in modern life to always be social, to prove your worth through your connections, or just to stay busy so you never have to deal with a quiet room and your own thoughts. But if you look closer, especially after you've spent some time intentionally protecting your energy, you might be surprised to discover that solitude isn't just tolerable. It's one of the most powerful, calming states you can reach. People often confuse being alone with loneliness, but these are two completely different things. Loneliness is that ache you feel when you crave company or validation, but aren't getting it. Solitude, especially when chosen and embraced, is a kind of contentment. It's when you're satisfied just existing by yourself, and your sense of self isn't tied to who's around or what they think about you. This is a special kind of self-sufficiency, and interestingly, it tends to unnervingly surprise the very people who used to overlook or underestimate you. Imagine the reaction of someone who thought you'd always chase their attention when you suddenly seem perfectly happy on your own. Maybe you're spending evenings enjoying your interests, building your skills, or just doing nothing much at all, but you're not desperate for invites, validation, or their approval anymore. This shift can be a wake-up call for those who relied on your neediness or your pattern of always being the dependable backup. When you show contentment and independence, it's as if the ground of the relationship changes. Often, they see you in a new light, sometimes with curiosity, sometimes a bit of regret. What most people don't realize until they actually try it is that being comfortable with time alone takes practice, just like any skill. At first, if you're used to filling every gap in your schedule with plans, the silence can be uncomfortable. You might notice an urge to check your phone, scroll social media, or text people just to fill the space. But over days and weeks, these impulses usually soften. Gradually, your mind starts to settle, and you get curious about yourself outside of constant feedback. You rediscover old interests or find new ones, and you start to realize your best ideas and sense of direction often show up when nobody else is around to influence you. There's something powerful about not having to answer to anyone about what you want to do with your time. Maybe you want to try a new recipe, watch a movie at 3 in the afternoon, take a nap, read for hours, or go for a spontaneous walk with no destination. In these moments, you get to see who you are when you aren't performing for anyone else's benefit. You get to check in with your mood, energy, and motivation, not based on what people expect, but on what actually fits for you in that moment. The more you do this, the stronger that sense of independence grows. It's important to point out that finding contentment in solitude doesn't mean you no longer value friendships, romance, or family. On the contrary, when you feel full and balanced on your own, you bring a more genuine version of yourself into every relationship. You're not spending time with people to fill a desperate need or to avoid discomfort. You're with them because you genuinely want to be, not because you have to be. This changes the entire dynamic. People sense that you enjoy their company, but you're not trapped by it, and that adds a sense of honesty and security to your connections. Sometimes you might notice that thriving on your own makes other people uncomfortable at first, especially if they expected you to fall apart without their presence or approval. This isn't because there's anything wrong with being independent. It's just that for some, the idea that someone can be genuinely happy and fulfilled without constant company is unfamiliar. In some cases, they might test your new boundaries, or even try to guilt you for making different choices. But if you stay steady, not defensive, and just keep taking care of yourself, people either learn to respect your independence or leave space for others who do. A big benefit of enjoying your own company is that it clears your mind and lowers stress. When you're alone, there's no performance pressure. There's space for your feelings, your thoughts, your dreams, and your mistakes, all without anyone else's commentary. You're free to recharge, to think through what you actually want, to rest, or to dive into any activity without the noise of outside opinions. This quiet time is where you reset your energy after busy days, solve tough problems, or process emotions that got pushed aside in the chaos. Some people are surprised at how much creativity and motivation show up when they take intentional time to be alone. Maybe you finally write that story you've had in your head for years, experiment with a new hobby, work out, or learn something new just because it interests you. When you start creating for the sake of enjoyment, without worrying how it looks to anyone else, you often end up discovering passions and talents you didn't know you had. Being happy on your own also teaches you to appreciate moments of connection in a healthier way. If you've ever hung out with someone just because you felt bored or empty by yourself, you know that those interactions usually lack spark or meaning. When you come to the table already full, already secure, rested, and engaged, you can be present for deeper conversations, laugh a little louder, and actually share life instead of trying to get something from someone else. Ironically, people find you more attractive and fun to be around when you're not relying on them to fix your mood or self-worth. It's not uncommon, once you start enjoying solitude, to notice changes in how you pick friends, partners, or even co-workers to spend time with. The neediness fades, and you become a lot more selective. You pay attention to who brings real value, who listens, who shares, and who treats you with kindness. When you don't need constant validation, you won't settle for relationships that drain or belittle you just to avoid being alone. This is a big turning point for many people who grew up feeling like they always needed someone to be whole. You'll also find that being content by yourself gives you better boundaries when others try to manipulate you or pull you into one-sided arrangements. If you're fine having a weekend alone, you're not so easily guilted into saying yes to plans or favors that don't feel right. You can say, "I need some time for myself," without panicking about missing out or worrying about what people will think. The freedom that comes with this kind of self-approval is hard to overstate. It means you're leading your own life, not just following whoever happens to be the loudest or most demanding in the moment. For people who dealt with being undervalued, overlooked, or ignored, learning to thrive in solitude can be one of the most life-changing habits. Suddenly, you're not waiting around for scraps of attention or chasing after people who only give you affection when it suits them. You don't need to prove yourself every weekend, to beg for a text back, or chase after someone else's approval just to feel okay. You set the tone for your own well-being. As this confidence grows, you stop seeing yourself as a victim of other people's moods or decisions. You become more proactive in shaping your relationships and your daily life. This independence is not about being cold or distant. It just means your life is centered on your own values, not on getting a constant reaction from others. You might even find you're more likely to show up for community events, volunteer, or just be helpful, because you have the bandwidth and the security to do it from a place of fullness, not need. Of course, not every day spent alone is going to be perfect or blissful. Sometimes you'll feel bored, restless, or even a bit lonely, especially if you're going through a tough season. The point of learning to be content in solitude isn't about pretending these emotions don't exist, but about handling them without panic or self-judgment. You trust that the feeling will pass, and you know what works for you, whether it's a walk, a creative project, a favorite meal, or reaching out to someone who leaves you feeling heard. Over time, as you make peace with those quieter moments, you'll probably notice that your tolerance for uncomfortable emotions grows. You aren't as shaken by boredom, sadness, or awkward silences. Instead, you see them as passing states, not a sign that anything is wrong with you. This kind of emotional resilience makes it easier to bounce back when life throws curveballs, because you trust yourself and have learned you're okay, even in the rough patches. One unexpected shift that happens for a lot of people is that enjoying solitude leads you to deeper self-awareness. Without all the external static, you start to notice patterns. What drains you, what energizes you when you're most creative, and what values keep showing up. You gain clarity about your future because you're finally listening to your own voice, not just reacting to whatever's loudest around you. The decisions you make are more aligned with who you really are. You get better at choosing what and who you invite into your world. Learning to truly enjoy your own company also has a ripple effect on your goals and sense of direction. No longer sidetracked by everyone else's needs and expectations, you find you have more room to plan, to pursue long-term goals, and to keep promises to yourself. Personal projects, healthy routines, and ambitions that always got sidetracked start getting your full attention. This is how a lot of people finally write their book, start their business, or transform their health, because they gave themselves permission to put their own plans first for once. As you settle into the habit of contented independence, you may be surprised by how much appreciation you get from the people who matter. The friends or family who really value you will notice the changes, and often they'll thank you for being a calmer, more present, less distracted version of yourself. Sometimes you'll inspire people around you to do their own work, to check in with their needs, or to set their own boundaries. Healthy independence is catching. When you model it, people want to know your secret. For those who felt overlooked or undervalued by a certain group, it can even be a game changer to do things you love alone, instead of waiting for company. Trying a new restaurant solo, traveling by yourself, going to a concert, or simply exploring new neighborhoods on your own terms gives you experiences that are unfiltered. You get to see the world with fresh eyes, and you bring back stories that are completely yours. Far from limiting your social life, this kind of independent exploration can actually make it more interesting. Sometimes, if the people who didn't value you notice how much you're thriving alone, they may reach out or try to reconnect. It can be tempting to go back to old habits, to slip into that easy pattern of seeking their validation. But because you've built up genuine contentment and strength in being on your own, you can decide from a position of power whether those relationships are worth your energy. If you choose to let them back in, it's on your own terms, from a place of security, not need. The more you experience the upsides of contented independence, the less afraid you become of alone time. It becomes a regular part of your self-care, a time to refocus, recharge, and ground yourself before stepping back into the social world. This is when life starts to feel more like your own, less like a response to what others want or expect. It frees you to pursue what really lights you up, connect with people who get you, and create a daily routine that fits who you've actually become. In the long run, The ability to flourish in solitude means you stop settling. If something doesn't feel right, or if someone doesn't appreciate you, it no longer sends you into a spiral of self-doubt or desperation. Instead, you're able to calmly accept reality, focus on your own well-being, and open the door to deeper, more respectful connections. The quality of your relationships, your sense of purpose, and your day-to-day peace all start to improve. You know how to fill your own cup first, so what you share with the world is genuine, not given out of empty need, but from true surplus. When solitude becomes a source of calm and creativity, rather than something to avoid, you transform the way you experience every part of your life. You become more grounded in your values, less dependent on the unpredictable opinions of others, and more able to step forward confidently, even if only a few people are by your side. That's real strength, the kind that doesn't ask for applause, but can't be ignored, especially by those who once doubted your worth. Something you'll probably notice after some time spent being genuinely comfortable in your own company is that your attitude toward others starts to change too. The habits you build around solitude, self-awareness, self-acceptance, even some self-forgiveness, end up shaping how you treat the people in your orbit, even those who didn't see your value for what it was. And here's where life hands you something totally unexpected: the power that kindness and forgiveness hold, especially towards those who overlooked you or treated you poorly. Most people, after being undervalued, expect the natural response is to become closed off, distrustful, or at the very least a bit cold and short when that person comes back around. It's normal to feel suspicious. Why should you give any more kindness, let alone forgiveness, to someone who didn't see you? It almost feels like you're rewarding bad behavior or telling the world it's okay to ignore you. But as you get more secure in who you are, and you've spent enough time not relying on their attention for your well-being, you start to see that holding on to anger, even if it seems fair, just keeps you stuck. When you reach a point where their opinion or attention no longer pulls you out of balance, you actually have room to choose kindness without feeling weak or naive. Let's talk about kindness first. Everyone likes the idea in theory, but it's rarely our first instinct after being brushed aside or forgotten. You're more likely to want to ignore the person or even talk badly about them as a way to feel better. But when you choose to treat them with respect or simply maintain a civil attitude, you're doing yourself a favor. You're not letting their past actions shape who you are or how you show up. This doesn't mean being fake or pretending nothing happened. You're just letting go of the urge to be rude, spiteful, or play emotional games. If they ask for help, you can say yes or no based on what you want, not as a way to get even. If you cross paths, you can greet them, not because you're desperate for a response, but because you choose dignity over pettiness. Kindness also takes the pressure out of the room. Most people who know they've undervalued you expect distance or even hostility, especially if you've made it clear you're happier on your own now. Responding to them without bitterness or coldness often leaves them a bit uncomfortable, sometimes even remorseful. It sets you apart. Instead of being someone who needs revenge or holds on to grudges, you become someone who's above the drama. That's not about being superior, but about sticking to your chosen standards no matter who's watching. Then there's forgiveness, which might sound impossible if you've been really hurt or consistently ignored by someone who should have known better. A lot of people mix up forgiveness with letting someone off the hook, but in real life, it usually means setting yourself free. You acknowledge what happened. Maybe it was insensitive, unfair, or even damaging. You feel the pain, but you decide you're not going to relive it every time you see their name pop up or hear their voice. You choose to put down the anger, not because they deserve it, but because you do. You want the energy, the peace, and the forward motion that comes from not dragging that old resentment into every new day. Forgiveness doesn't have to be dramatic or public. You don't have to send a letter or explain yourself unless you feel it would help you. Sometimes, forgiveness is a quiet decision you make on a rainy morning, lying in bed and mentally letting someone off your emotional hook. You accept that you can't change the past, and you might privately hope they learn something. But you refuse to let their choices keep defining your mood or your story. Often, people who finally forgive those who never valued them report a massive sense of relief. Sometimes they're surprised that the moment is so quiet. There's no music, no big life-changing event, just a new lightness inside when they realize the hurt isn't in control anymore. This can even happen years after the fact, when you suddenly see someone in a new context or hear from them randomly and realize you're just not bitter anymore. That peace is worth every minute of the struggle it took to get there. Choosing kindness or forgiveness isn't about denying facts or letting people run over you all over again. In fact, it's only after you've set strong boundaries and gotten clear about your self-worth that these acts even make sense. Kindness here is not the same as being agreeable. It's honest, but not cruel. You say what's true, you stand your ground if you need to, but you don't drag people down just because you can. Forgiveness, too, isn't forgetting or excusing. It's saying, this happened. I wish it hadn't. I'm choosing to move forward anyway. If you want to see just how powerful this is, pay attention the next time someone who undervalued you tries to reconnect. When you treat them neutrally or kindly, even after everything, some of them might act a bit thrown. They're expecting drama, a cold shoulder, or a cutting remark. The calm response, acknowledging them like any other person without neediness or revenge, often makes them question their own actions. Now and then, you'll get an apology or a real conversation about what went wrong. But even if you don't, the main thing is that you aren't carrying their history as a burden. The practical benefits of kindness and forgiveness are underrated. You'll stress less in awkward encounters. Social circles that overlap become less awkward. You get more choices in how you respond to new people because you're not locked into a story about how everyone lets you down. Your body even feels better once you drop resentment, less tension, better sleep, and less anxiety about who you might run into at the store or online. Some people worry that kindness or forgiveness means letting people take advantage of them again, but the opposite can be true. If someone tries to use your kindness as a second chance to walk all over you, you have every right to protect your boundaries. It's not kind to yourself to say yes to more disrespect. Forgiveness is about cleaning up the old mess emotionally, not signing up for a repeat. You can wish someone well, let go of the anger, and still decide to keep a healthy distance. The power is in choosing your actions out of self-respect, not out of a need to fix, punish, or prove anything to anyone else. You might also find that after practicing this sort of genuine, non-dramatic kindness, people's behavior towards you changes. Maybe not all at once, and maybe not everyone, but word gets around. You're seen as someone with self-control and confidence, someone who's not hanging on past grudges or desperate for payback. Strangely enough, that makes people want to earn your good opinion more, instead of just assuming you owe them attention. In some cases, you'll notice people treat you with more care, ask for your input more, or show simple respect because they see you as fair and steady. There are also those who don't change, who either double down on their behavior or simply disappear when they realize they can't get a reaction out of you. That can be tough if you really wanted things to turn around, but there's also a certain peace in knowing you aren't trapped in someone else's emotional roller coaster. Life feels lighter with less drama, less scheming, and more honest interactions with people who are ready to grow up and show up. The world gets a little bit less heavy when you stop seeing every slight as something that needs to be paid back in equal measure. When you genuinely wish others well, maybe even those you have every right to hate, you end up with more peace yourself. It doesn't erase history or make you best friends, but it saves you from carrying emotional baggage that only slows you down. This doesn't mean you never get angry or don't care about justice. It just means you reserve your energy for the battles that actually matter, instead of fighting everyone who ever missed your value. A lot of people notice that the more they practice kindness and forgiveness in these situations, the less rattled they become by minor slights in daily life. Someone cuts you off in traffic, makes a rude comment at work, or forgets your coffee order. It just doesn't get under your skin as much. Instead of stockpiling reasons to be mad at the world, you carry around more mental space for the important stuff, the projects, dreams, and people who show up with honest effort. If you're the type who has been burned more than once, it's normal to take longer to trust those who let you down. Kindness and forgiveness don't mean handing them the keys to your life again. Sometimes they just mean putting down your defenses enough that you're not bitter every time their name comes up in conversation. You get the credit for how you move forward, not just what's happened to you. It's also smart to keep expectations realistic. Sometimes an apology never comes, and some people never take responsibility for what they did. Even in those cases, forgiveness is a gift you give yourself so you're not trapped in their shadow forever. Time and again, people who once tied themselves in knots over being undervalued will say the biggest freedom came not from changing everyone's mind, but from finally letting themselves stop caring so much about the old stories. Kindness and forgiveness give you back your time, your focus, and your sense of possibility. Old wounds start to heal by degrees until they just become part of your story instead of the headline. You can look back one day, maybe after a year, maybe after a decade, and thank yourself for being strong enough to let go, even when it felt impossible. What's interesting is that once this pattern of genuine kindness and strong, healthy letting go becomes your default, you start to attract different people too. Your calm, respectful way of dealing with disappointment stands out in a world obsessed with drama and payback. The friendships and opportunities you get now have a richer quality because people are choosing you for who you are, not just what you offer or how much they can get away with. You end up with a life that's more peaceful, more honest, and less crowded with unfinished business. In the end, kindness and forgiveness are less about what other people do and a lot more about who you decide to be. When you release old grudges and keep your dignity, you move through life more lightly, with less fear and more creativity. The people who failed to value you in the past might not even understand what's changed, but you'll feel the difference every single day. You'll have more energy, more time for new beginnings, and a simple, steady confidence that comes from knowing you live by your own values, no matter who's watching. That quiet strength in a world full of grudges and drama is a kind of power you never have to prove. Having that calm, steady way of letting old wounds roll off you, even reaching a point where kindness and forgiveness are your default, gives you a lot more room to simply focus on your own life. What becomes really interesting here is how you take all of that energy you once used worrying about other people's opinions or carrying grudges and start applying it to your own growth. When you've been undervalued, the urge might be to give up, coast along, or wait passively for someone to finally acknowledge what you bring to the table. But if you shift that approach and concentrate on personal excellence, no matter who's watching or clapping, you change the whole story of your life. It's a pretty remarkable thing. The process of striving for your best, especially after being ignored or overlooked, has a force all its own. Most people imagine that the motivation to improve themselves will dry up if they're not getting recognition, encouragement, or applause. Actually, the opposite can happen. If you let go of the need for validation from certain people or places, you stop performing for an invisible audience and start working for yourself. Every small bit of progress becomes an internal gold star, not dependent on who notices or says thank you. You realize that the most important person to impress, at the end of the day, is the person staring back at you in the mirror every morning. Picture a moment after you've been let down by someone. Maybe you worked late hours for a boss who gave the credit to someone else, or you put effort into a relationship that was barely acknowledged. The first urge might be to sulk or pull back effort, thinking, why bother if no one appreciates it? But something powerful happens if you keep going anyway. If you stick with the late project, show up prepared, practice your skills, take care of your health, or simply refine a personal talent, you start to change how you see yourself. Each day, the evidence of your own growth stacks up. Over time, this speaks louder than any external feedback. Other people notice, often in unexpected ways. The very ones who didn't value you sometimes end up surprised, confused even, when you're not just getting by, but actually excelling despite the lack of recognition. This kind of resilience can be disarming. It's unsettling to realize that someone you wrote off, underestimated or ignored has only become better, stronger, or more competent in the meantime. Sometimes you see these folks circle back, suddenly interested or wanting to reconnect. Sometimes they just observe from a distance, unsure of how to respond now that the script has flipped. One of the main mistakes people make after feeling overlooked is assuming that excellence is only worthwhile if it leads directly to acknowledgement or reward. The truth is, pursuing your own goals with discipline and purpose fills your life with new meaning, even if nobody's giving you a medal. Far from being a waste of time, it's a way of proving that your standards are set by you, not by bystanders. With each finished workout, completed project, or newly developed skill, you reinforce to yourself that you're in charge of the direction your life moves in. If you ask people who have made a habit of consistent self-improvement, you'll probably find their motivation comes from a place beyond, "I hope somebody notices." It's about seeing what's possible if you really show up for yourself. Think about the satisfaction of learning a new language over months, or growing a business slowly, or even just redecorating your home because it makes your mornings feel better. Those are personal victories no one can take away, no matter how little outside recognition you get. The more you practice this, the less you need applause as fuel to keep going. It's also worth mentioning how this attitude impacts the way people see you over the long haul. The world is full of folks who start strong, then give up when compliments dry up. But the ones who keep working, training, writing, or building, even when no one's clapping, end up developing a reputation for grit and long-term dedication. People may not say anything right away, but they notice. Eventually, you might even find old critics or former doubters bringing up your name in a positive light. By then, of course, you realize that the approval is nice but not essential. Something else shifts internally as well. When your focus is personal excellence, you waste less time comparing yourself to others. Instead of looking sideways to see who's ahead, who's behind, or who's doing less and getting more praise, you start tuning all that noise out. You check in with yesterday's version of yourself. Are you making progress? Are you learning? If the answer is yes, then nothing else really matters. That day-to-day improvement becomes its own reward, and flaws don't sting as much. They're just proof that you're still in the process of getting better. There will always be days when frustration creeps in, when it feels like you're jogging in place, or when the people who once ignored you still don't notice how much you've grown. That's part of being human. But the key difference now is that you don't let those moments stop you completely. You give yourself space to vent, reset, and then come back to what really matters: your own intentions, your own progress, and your own standards for what a meaningful life looks like. This is not a call to never care about other people's opinions ever again. Everyone is wired to want appreciation and connection. But when your main focus is on your personal growth, you're not destroyed by the absence of those things. You still love encouragement when it comes, but you don't wither in its absence. This switch, from needing recognition to building excellence regardless of who's watching, is powerful. It makes you stronger, steadier, and less vulnerable to the ups and downs of other people's moods and judgments. You might notice, too, that as you improve, you attract higher quality interactions and opportunities. People who are drawn to growth, not drama, start coming into your life. Colleagues ask to collaborate on new projects. Friends ask about your latest goals. Even in romance, confidence and steady progress are magnetic. The energy around you shifts because it's obvious you're not waiting to be picked. You're moving on your own terms, whether or not anyone follows. Let's say you dedicate yourself to a quiet project. Maybe you take an online course no one asked for, or you spend evenings taking care of your physical health, or you design something creative in the background. A year goes by, then two. Suddenly doors open or people start commenting about your new skills, your changed mindset, or the effect of your commitment. What seemed invisible for months or years can suddenly become impossible to ignore. The best part is, by the time others notice, you're already miles past needing their approval. Another bonus is that this approach makes rejection and criticism sting less. If you're used to working for outward recognition, every setback or dismissive comment can feel like a personal attack. But if your intention is consistent improvement, rejections just become part of the feedback loop. Was there something to learn here? Should you try something different next time? You can take the helpful bits, ignore the rest, and keep moving. Life evens out, and your identity isn't on trial in every interaction. Pursuing excellence has a side effect, a sense of peace. When you know you're showing up for yourself, you end up satisfied in a way that chasing applause will never give you. You feel good at the end of the day, not because the crowd cheered, but because you completed what you set out to do. You respect yourself more. You trust your ability to keep showing up, even when it's hard, boring, or unnoticed. The inside-out satisfaction just keeps building. This whole pattern is even stronger when you think about the negative judgments of others. Maybe people once told you it wasn't worth trying, or that you didn't have what it takes, or that someone else would be better for the job, the friendship, or the relationship. If you can keep moving in spite of those doubts, you stop living under their conclusions. The next time you accomplish something, or just make steady progress for months in a row, their voices get quieter. Your own voice gets louder. That shift is priceless. Sometimes the effort you're making is invisible for a while. Growth is like that. Early results don't always show on the outside. You eat healthy for months before the mirror catches up. You stick with a hobby, a business, or a creative outlet long before people stop seeing it as a phase. But if you don't quit just because recognition is slow, you end up with real skills, real achievements, and the kind of inner strength that can't be faked. It's not always exciting, and there are long stretches where it's just you and your process. But those are the moments that build the kind of confidence you want most. Quiet, lasting, impossible to take away with a rude comment or a cold shoulder. A lot of self-improvement books and videos make progress sound like a competition, but when you're on this path, you realize it isn't about beating anyone else. Your only real opponent is yesterday's lack of effort or today's temptation to give up. If another person never changes their opinion or fails to notice your progress, it doesn't reduce the value of what you did. That's real freedom. Every new project, every small win is yours no matter the applause. You might even bump into moments when the people who undervalued you actually come asking for advice, want to work with you, or quietly show respect after seeing how far you've come. It's tempting in those cases to throw the past in their face, but if you've built your progress on internal validation, you don't need revenge. You're operating from a wider view now, too busy building the next step to spend energy going back over old ground. Your daily routines, priorities, and circle of influence all change naturally as you keep moving forward. Instead of spending time and energy trying to prove them wrong, you just live your life. The proof happens all by itself. Excellence, even in small, consistent doses, is unforgettable for the right people. In the end, your growth is obvious. not because you shouted it from rooftops, but because results, and the confidence behind them, can't stay hidden forever. There's a practical lesson in all of this. You don't have to stay stuck in the roles others gave you. If someone didn't value you or made you feel invisible for months or years, it's not a life sentence. You get to work on what matters to you, make progress at your own pace, and decide what excellence looks like on your terms. The rewards may take their time to show up, but they always belong to you, and no one has the power to take them away just because they missed it at the start. You'll notice the ripple effect in small ways, too. The discipline you build to keep going, the humility to improve, and the focus to come back after disappointment shows up in parts of your life you didn't expect. You make healthier choices, navigate setbacks with less drama, and notice more chances to help others along the way. Without needing recognition as your oxygen, your stability grows, and your positive impact shows up even beyond your original goals. A lot of people say they want to prove something to those who never valued them. But the real win is living a life where you're proud of what you do, and one where you don't owe your happiness to outside validation. Pursuing excellence, regardless of who's watching, means you wake up with purpose and go to sleep knowing you gave the day your best shot, whether or not anyone else noticed. That's not just impressive, it's the kind of satisfaction that keeps you moving forward for years to come. So when you think about how you want to handle being undervalued, or when someone doubts your abilities, consider what happens if you keep growing anyway. Push forward quietly. Build out your skills. Take care of your body and mind. Learn new things just to see what you're capable of. Your efforts will outlast every insult, every slight, and even every silent crowd. In the long run, a pattern of personal excellence is its own answer to being ignored. It's a legacy that stands with or without applause. And one day, you'll look back and realize you're living a life built by your own effort, on your terms, with pride that doesn't need anyone else's permission to exist. Even as you keep working on yourself and improving no matter who does or doesn't acknowledge it, there's still one area left that makes a surprising difference in how you experience the world. Learning how to keep your inner calm even when everything around you is falling apart or challenging you in ways you didn't expect. You might think of this as keeping your cool or not letting drama drag you down. But it's really about building a kind of peace inside yourself that can't be swept away by criticism, other people's moods, gossip, or sudden disappointments. This skill stands out the most when others are trying to get a reaction from you, hoping you'll finally crack, or simply behaving in ways that used to destabilize you. The first part of this unshakable serenity is accepting that you really have no control over what's going on outside you. Life is unpredictable. People are a mix of generous and selfish, fair and unfair. Sometimes whole groups just don't make sense no matter how hard you try to understand them. When you accept that outside chaos isn't your responsibility, something inside relaxes. There's less of a need to micromanage, correct, or fit in with whatever the current drama or crisis may be. Instead, you turn your attention to how you're going to respond, how you're going to protect your peace, and what you'll choose to focus on while everything is hectic. Being stable inside isn't about being numb, it's about noticing things just as they are and reminding yourself that not every battle is yours to fight. When someone is rude for no reason or tries to get under your skin, your first reaction might be to lash back, defend yourself, or replay their words all week long. But as you practice this kind of inner calm, you get better at letting those moments pass through without leaving a mark. Sometimes it helps to literally pause and check in with yourself before responding, is this really about me? Am I obliged to take on this problem, or can I let it go? That small bit of self-reflection goes a long way. Life gets lighter when you let go of the urge to react to every bit of chaos that travels your way. It's worth mentioning how much people notice when you keep that sense of calm, especially in groups or situations where it's normal for tempers to flare or for everyone to get swept up in a wave of anxiety. At work, the person who doesn't panic when the deadline is tight or when someone is freaking out becomes quietly respected, even if no one says it directly. In family gatherings, the one who can listen to drama without piling on or losing their cool eventually becomes the person others lean on for stability. This doesn't mean you have to solve everyone's problems, but your ability to stay grounded leaves an impression. Often, when people try to unsettle you, maybe by criticizing, cold shouldering, or dismissing you, they're counting on an emotional reaction. They want to win by getting you to explode, defend yourself endlessly, or fall apart. When you don't take the bait, that calm becomes both a shield and a kind of silent statement. Instead of giving them control over how your day goes, you stay centered. This doesn't mean you say nothing if someone crosses a major line, but it means you actively choose where to put your words and your energy, rather than being yanked around by every outside storm. This approach also helps a lot with those recurring thoughts that can keep you up at night, worrying if you did something wrong, if people are judging you, or if you should have handled something differently. When you get in the habit of tuning out external chaos, these mental loops start to lose their grip. You learn to spot the difference between what's in your lane and what isn't. Again, you remind yourself, not everything is your responsibility. Not everything is about you. This kind of self-talk doesn't happen by accident, though. It usually takes practice, catching yourself each time your mind starts to spiral and gently pulling your attention back to what you can actually control right now. People sometimes wonder if keeping calm means letting injustice slide or never standing up for yourself. That's not the case. True serenity is active. It gives you the space to choose your battles and make your points when it actually matters, instead of spilling all your energy every time someone acts up. Because you're not running on anxiety or anger, you can stand your ground without losing control or getting caught up in pointless debate. In fact, sometimes the quietest person in the room, the one who keeps their peace, is the one who eventually gets listened to the most. On a daily level, your job becomes noticing what triggers your stress. A particular coworker, family pattern, tight schedule, or just the news cycle. And then developing routines to keep yourself steady no matter what's swirling around. Maybe this means regular quiet time, some exercise, deep breaths before responding to emails, or even short walks to clear your head. Over time, you start to build a set of habits that make it harder for outside chaos to get in. Little by little, you become the person who recovers faster from setbacks, who laughs off gossip, who refuses to rush into panic when plans change. When it comes to people who repeatedly try to knock you off your foundation, those who have missed your value in the past or get stuck in drama and negativity, your serenity gives you a kind of quiet power. Some of them might get frustrated that their old tactics don't bother you anymore. Others might get curious, maybe trying to figure out your secret or even seeking advice. What stands out is that your mood, your decisions, and your self-worth are no longer on the line every time someone else does something unpredictable. You are leading your own life, not being pulled this way and that by anyone who knocks on the door. It's also easier to avoid the trap of over-explaining yourself or rushing to fix problems that aren't yours to solve. A lot of stress comes from scrambling to keep everyone happy. But when you're steady inside, it's simpler to say, "That's not mine," or "I'll help if I can, but I'm not responsible for the outcome." It feels odd at first, especially if you're used to jumping in or being the peacemaker in every situation. Eventually, though, the freedom is obvious. There's more energy for your own projects, your own rest, or for helping in ways that are meaningful to you, not forced by group chaos. Serenity makes daily life smoother in small but real ways. In traffic, in lines at the store, at noisy family events, or just moving through unexpected messes, you still get frustrated, but the irritation fades faster. It helps you look for solutions, not just problems. You become able to take a step back from the emotional messiness and ask, what's really needed here? Sometimes the answer is nothing, silence, a deep breath, or even turning your attention to something more important. Other times, it means you use your energy for action, but from a position of choice, not reaction. If you've ever worked somewhere where stress runs high, think about the people who kept steady, no matter what happened. Maybe a long-time manager, maybe just the coworker who always knew how to diffuse tension. Over time, their approach sets the tone for others. A calm presence is contagious. When everyone else is panicking, the person who doesn't feed the drama helps others see that crises are mostly temporary, that the sky isn't falling, and that nobody wins by scrambling or yelling. Even if you're not in a leadership role, your mood sends ripples through the people you interact with. This isn't about pretending you're never rattled. Everyone has limits, and even the calmest folks can get overwhelmed. The difference over weeks and months is that you notice the signs earlier and can take steps to reset before things get out of control. You build up a kind of resilience muscle that doesn't go away just because you have a bad week or someone tries to provoke you. The more you practice, the more your calm becomes a steady state, not just a moment-to-moment effort. One thing you'll discover is that having this unshakable calm doesn't mean you're passive or never challenged. You just stop letting other people's unpredictability or even their intentional negativity determine how you feel about yourself and your choices. People can say what they want, act out, or ignore your efforts, but it's like their noise can't sink into your foundations anymore. This type of serenity often helps with letting go of old stories too. If you're not always reliving the moment you were passed over, disrespected, or excluded, you have more mental space for new ideas, hope, and better relationships. You're not building walls, just refusing to center your whole world on the next rejection or the last bad day. This approach frees you up to actually enjoy life, setbacks and all, without always worrying when the next blow will come. If you're someone who has been the target of gossip, low-key bullying, or exclusion, reaching this point can feel almost unreal. Suddenly, you're less interested in winning arguments or proving your worth. You notice the anxiety settling down, the urgent need to defend yourself fading. You might even find more humor in stressful moments, since chaos is now just background noise, not a full-on crisis every time. Physical health often improves as you let go of reactivity too. Less stress can mean better sleep, steadier energy, fewer headaches, and a calmer mood overall. You're not burning through adrenaline every day. Your body gets the message that rest and peace are not just possible, but normal. In turn, you get more done, your mind is sharper, and daily life feels less like a firefight and more like something you're directing. You'll also start to notice subtle shifts in how people treat you. When you're not so easy to rattle, some people drop their attempts to get a rise out of you. They might respect your boundaries more, or they might just move on to someone else who's more reactive. The people who actually want good for you tend to respond with honesty and stability. New friendships, better work alliances, and even closer family connections bloom in the steady atmosphere you create. Over longer periods, months and even years, the real effect of cultivating this inward peace is a bigger sense of trust in yourself. Life is always going to be unpredictable, and there will always be people who stir up trouble, whether it's at work, in your social circles, or within your family. But the more you prove to yourself that you can stay steady no matter what's going on, the more confident you get in facing whatever comes next. You find it easier to let go quickly, move back to center, and enjoy your day regardless of minor disasters or disappointments. Sometimes you'll hear people call this emotional detachment, but that doesn't mean you don't care. It's just a way of recognizing what matters and what doesn't, and having the discipline to redirect your energy accordingly. The big difference from old habits is that you actively choose how to respond, not just to other people, but to your own worries, doubts, and moods. You probably won't get a round of applause for being steady. Most of the time, serenity gets noticed only when it's missing or when the world gets especially dramatic. But it's one of life's best skills. It saves you from unnecessary arguments, wasted days, and sleepless nights. It keeps your self-worth safe, even when people are rude, unpredictable, or unfair. And it creates a kind of invisible force field that allows you to give more, enjoy more, and steadily build the kind of life you actually want, not just the one that's handed to you by other people's chaos. At the end of it all, you're not letting the bad days, the negative people, or even the system shake your core. You know what you stand for, you take care of your peace, and you trust yourself to weather whatever comes next without letting it knock you off balance. The unpredictability of others is just background noise. You know your own value, carry your calm, and move forward in your own time. This is the kind of attitude that attracts the right people, opens the right doors, and lets you keep enjoying your life, even when storms are raging all around. How you hold your ground, stay calm, and push forward in your own lane is pretty crucial. But at some point you're going to come against a question that can feel a lot heavier than any individual misunderstanding or clash with someone who didn't value you. That's the question of what type of person you actually want to be, regardless of what others have done to you. Maybe you've had moments where revenge feels tempting, or your mind drifts toward proving a point to those who doubted you, shamed you, or shut you out. That's normal, especially if you've been knocked down a lot or watched someone else reap rewards off your hard work. But there's another path, one that's less about counterattack and more about your own code. This is living by your own sense of virtue, not spending your days and nights finding ways to get even. Let's talk honestly. Wanting justice is a built-in reaction. Almost everyone gets those thoughts that spring up when you're hurt. A desire to show people how wrong they were, to finally make your mark, or ride off into the sunset with a dramatic, "I told you so." You might even picture the scenes where the tables are turned, or imagine what you'll say if they come crawling back. In fact, you can sometimes find motivation in those feelings, especially right after a setback. But look at what happens down the line. If you keep chasing revenge, even in subtle ways, like always waiting for people to acknowledge their mistakes or setting secret traps for their reputation, it starts eating up your attention, your time, your peace. It's exhausting. You become trapped in a loop where all your choices are shaped by your enemies or doubters instead of your own goals. This is where living according to your own values becomes a real superpower. Instead of being reactive and letting your days be shaped by who wronged you or who's paying attention, you recenter yourself every morning around your own standards. What matters to you? What do you want your days to look like? Are you living with honesty? Or are you getting caught up in drama just because drama is what you got? If you don't decide these things for yourself, the world will push you into a million little side quests, most of which go nowhere and leave you more tired and bitter than before. Take wisdom, for example. If you pause before acting and actually ask yourself if a small win today is worth burning bridges or feeding grudges, you'll notice how often the answer is not really. Most of the things people do to get back at others fade in importance after a few weeks or months. But the impact they have on your own mood, your own reputation, and how you feel about your choices lasts much longer. Wisdom isn't always exciting, but day by day it adds up. Then there's courage, being brave enough to keep showing up, to work honestly, or even to wish someone well after they let you down. It might not be dramatic, but it's not weak either. Courage looks like not stooping to pettiness when you could, or holding the door open for a new opportunity instead of settling into victim mode. Sometimes the bravest thing is stepping away quietly or starting something new, even if nobody believes you can do it. And there's justice. Not the kind where you take everything personally and try to hand out punishment for every slight, but the type where you treat people how you'd want to be treated. even the ones who let you down. Justice is more than fairness in that way. It's sticking by your own rules and refusing to sink to other people's worst behavior. When you operate like this, people eventually pick up on the difference. You're not easily pushed around, but you're not running on bitterness either. These daily choices, stacked together, start making a big impact both on how you see yourself and on what kind of respect you attract. When you keep your attention on being decent, sticking to your word, taking responsibility for your mistakes, and aiming to lift the room up rather than drag it down, you stop wasting so much time on what you can't control. Life feels simpler. You can look back on your day and, even if the outside world was unfair, know you did the best with what you had without selling yourself short. Some people might think that living by virtue or personal code sounds old-fashioned. They might even laugh at it or try to get you to join their drama or revenge trip. But over time, pay attention, and you'll see that the ones who stand out in any setting are the people who act with quiet integrity. Colleagues trust them. Friends stay loyal. New opportunities show up because their reputation speaks for itself, while everyone else is still running in circles, looking for payback or validation from people who probably won't ever offer it. This path doesn't mean you ignore when people treat you badly or pretend it never happened. In fact, standing for your values sometimes means walking away, making a tough call, or explaining plainly why someone is no longer part of your circle. But you do these things as a matter of principle, not to score points or show them. You're not living for drama. Your life becomes less about reactions and more about purpose. Every decision starts from what's right in this situation. Instead of what will make them sorry, there isn't always instant gratification in this approach. Some days you won't get acknowledgement no matter how decent or fair you are. At first, that might sting. But after a while, it's freeing because you stop waiting for the outside world's unpredictable rewards. You start measuring your progress by your own standards, and you find a satisfaction that isn't as shaky as the world's approval or apology. It's sturdy. It helps you sleep better at night, keep your head up, and invest energy in things that go somewhere. The flip side of this is what happens when you don't choose this path, when you do let yourself get caught in cycles of revenge or constant one-upmanship. Little by little, you lose track of who you wanted to be when you started out. Months fly by and you realize your goals, your relationships, even things you once loved have taken a back seat to endless dramas or proving a point. Everyone loses time to this. It's nothing to be ashamed of. But when you spot it happening, that's your signal to recalibrate. Take stock of your habits and ask honestly, are they leading you closer to the life you'd be proud of, or just into more and more circles of payback and regret? Sticking to your values even when nobody is watching is where your real power comes from. That's when you stop being a background character in other people's stories and step back into your own. Maybe it's as simple as choosing honesty when it would be easier to copy what everyone else is doing. Or treating someone with respect even if you didn't get it back. Or not gossiping about someone who wronged you because you know words ripple and your reputation is one of the few things you always get to own. With enough practice, living by virtue gets easier. It becomes your first instinct instead of a forced effort. A kind of inner compass that steers you back when life goes off the rails. People might not praise it out loud, but they notice. Even those who didn't value you in the past eventually realize you won't be dragged into their games. Some might test you, others will respect you quietly. Over time, you'll see more and more that the quality of the people and opportunities that show up improves as your standards get more consistent. You'll also see that living like this doesn't mean you're passive or always nice. Sometimes strong values mean setting hard boundaries, calling out real problems, or even holding people accountable. The point is to do it from a place of clarity and self-respect, not from old wounds. When you move through conflict with your standards intact, you come out the other side more intact yourself, no matter how messy the external situation gets. It's also worth pointing out that none of this is about being perfect. Everyone slips. You'll have times when your temper gets the better of you, or when an old grudge sneaks back in. If you resolve to start fresh each day, make repairs when you need to, and stick to the code more often than not, you're doing better than most. The ones who value consistency rather than drama are always the ones whose presence feels safe in the long run. A really important part of living a life of virtue instead of revenge is it draws a much clearer vision of your own future. You're able to think bigger, not just in reactive moves, but in creating what you want: a career, a home life, friendships, maybe projects or even adventures that mean something beyond the next score-settling moment. You start planning for the long term, making decisions that will still feel good in 5 years, not just 5 minutes. That kind of thinking puts distance between you and the cycle of drama most people get stuck in. Another positive effect is that the time and energy you use to spend stewing, planning comebacks, or tracking who said what can now be pushed into things you want to build and people who actually support you. Whether it's learning something new, helping others, building habits, or deepening your existing relationships, you get results you can see and feel. Your attention is no longer being hijacked by things that, honestly, were never worth it in the first place. As you keep this approach up, you notice that it also helps you stay more adaptable. Life never goes exactly as we plan, and setbacks are guaranteed. When your focus is on your values and goals, setbacks become bumps, sometimes big ones, but not brick walls. You can learn, get back up, change course if you need to, and keep your peace, because your energy wasn't spent chasing down every critic or minor slight. Maybe the best part about choosing virtue over revenge is how much lighter you feel moving through your day-to-day. You're not carrying around old stories or replaying awkward conversations, looking for that perfect snappy line you could have delivered. You waste less time in what-ifs because you know you did your best based on your standards, not someone else's ability to applaud or apologize. And on those occasions when the people who never valued you do show up again, sometimes asking for help, sometimes just observing how far you've come, you won't need to rehearse how you'll prove them wrong. Your very life will be the answer. If you say yes to helping, it's by choice, not out of a thirst to show them up. If you turn them down, it's not icy, but simply honest to where you're at. Either way, there's no game. There's just clarity about who you are and what matters. Think about what it would be like if every choice today was about what kind of person you want to be, not about what you want to get from someone or how you want to win against them. Even in small decisions, what you say, what you prioritize, whether you hold a door open or speak your opinion, you'd end the day with a bit more pride, a bit less regret, and a lot less drama. Over a week, a month, a year, those choices add up to a reputation, a momentum, relationships, and a peace of mind that always outweigh a quick gotcha moment. In the end, leaving revenge and drama aside isn't just better for those around you, it's the best gift you give yourself. You finally stop being defined by who didn't recognize your worth, and you start shaping the world you actually want to live in, one clear choice at a time. Most of the time, the people worth keeping around notice it, even if the ones who missed your value never do. And you get to keep every bit of energy, focus, and pride that comes from being true to yourself no matter what. That's the version of you no one can overlook.